moderator. First of all, let me thank the government of Brazil for the kind invitation extended to me. Unlike Professor Vidit, this is my first visit to Brazil and Brasilia, so I hope I will get further invitations. Yes, what can I bring to this debate? Actually, initially I wrote to the moderator and others asking whether there will be overlaps, but of course I now can see there will not be no overlaps because Nadine talked about mainly Latin America and also irregular migration, and Professor Vidit mostly dealt with law on the move. So my migration background and then of course Asian perspective and things which I can bring to this debate. Now, the structure of my, yes, they have not put the presentation, yeah, okay. No, it's okay. Yeah, let me start with a picture. This is by a Brazilian child. There was an exhibition of children's views on child labor. Geneva World Association and the ILO convened that, and there were many pictures given by children, paintings, and this is on Brasilia. I think you can understand what is there in Portuguese, but it brings this conflict children have between poverty and actually income earning. Give up books for exploitation, like sexual exploitation. Now, what is the structure of my presentation? First, I start with a few key messages, then talk about definitions and categories. There I can be brief because Professor Vidit also talked about that, and also Nadine. And then also go on to this issues of internal and international migration, different kind of migration. What we know is internal migrants are always outnumber international migrants. And then the interaction between migrant children and children of migrants and child labor. Then some thoughts on policy directions. What are the key messages I want to highlight? First, in an era of globalization and transnationalism, mobility is a better term than migration. Migration is seen by many as a problem, but I think but the more positive side is when you think about mobility in the current world. Then children have a right to mobility. Nobody can deny that, like adults, in conditions of dignity, justice, equity, and security. I'm just highlighting this because it's not only safe migration, where people talk about safe migration, but it is much beyond that. They need decent conditions of migration. Then, third, this focus on trafficking and irregular migration. Yeah, this has been an excuse for governments, many countries, to introduce migration laws which ignore the precarious position of children. I recall recently a UK minister mentioned when there was talk about Afghan independent children migrants, vulnerable children. He said, oh, this is all work of Afghan traffickers. And you just dismiss the problem of children in that way. Then there is also more emphasis currently on temporary circular migration, but I think this also works against family unification and also aggravates the problem of left behind children. So the way forward, as my previous speakers mentioned, is addressing child labor and its worst forms, depends on effective partnerships for the decent work agenda. Now I start with some quotations. The first one is a Chinese quotation, a proverb, actually old proverb. For your country, if you plan for a year, plant rice. If you plan for a decade, plant trees. If you plan for a lifetime, educate children. I think this brings out very clearly the issue we are dealing with. Then Guy Ryder, whom you saw this morning, listened to this morning, he said, child labor is a fundamental abuse of human rights. It denies girls and boys the right to be a child, to access quality education, and to hope for the future. It's the antithesis of decent work, child labor. And from this base document, the roadmap of the 2010 second child labor conference, which was referred to in the morning, says government should consider ways to address the potential vulnerability of children to, in particular, the worst form of child labor in the context of migratory flows. This is quite important. Most worst forms of child labor can occur during migratory flows within, whether internal or external. So categories of children, categories of migrants and children in migration. I won't go in detail, but let me just, you can classify migration by destination, internal, international, south, north, as mentioned. Gender, male, female, it makes a lot of difference because females have specific considerations. Then forced and voluntary agency. Then purpose, whether for employment, for persecution or armed conflict. Then skill profile, skilled and low skilled. This makes a lot of difference. Skilled migrants normally can take care of themselves and their families, whereas most of the world's protection problems are for low skilled workers and their families. And permanent stay, whether duration, temporary or permanent stay. Again, integration possibilities are better for permanent migrants. And migratory status, which was highlighted by the previous speakers, whether regular or irregular, or documented or undocumented. So child migration, whether it is intentional or international, will crisscross with all these categories. That is what makes it more complicated. So 3 categories: migrating with the family, then independent migrants or unaccompanied children, and then children left behind by migrant parents. They are not really migrants, but the migration context affects them a lot. And in this panel, we were supposed to talk about children of migrants also. And purpose, whether you are going for education, employment, better life, etc. So children born to immigrant parents in a host country, they also deserve a lot of attention. Because especially if you are undocumented and you are born, you actually carry over that kind of legacy and be subject to all the problems which Nadine mentioned. And also, even if you are second generation, your parents migrated legally, this immigrant status affects you in terms of xenophobia, discrimination, whether you are a citizen of the country. That is something you cannot address because it is with your name. So the bulk of mobility is within countries, as I mentioned, for both adults and children, rural to urban migration. Internal migrants were estimated at 340 million in some estimate. I don't know how reliable that is. And global migration in 2013 at 232 million. Then definitions of children and youth. Again, I will be brief here. You all know about this. Children with 0 to 17 years, below 18 years. Youth, 15 to 24 years is the ILO and UN definitions. And then they overlap children group and overlapping ages and categories, youth and working children. The problem is we cannot have the ideal data because population censuses for most countries, they use 5-year digit intervals. So you get 10 to 14, 15 to 19, but you don't get this category 10 to 17 or 10 to 18. So this is a problem in trying to identify this group. And OECD in its studies, children of immigrants in the labor market, they define them as 20 to 29 years. They are really youth. So let us look at the latest global estimates of migration by the UN Population Division. What they find is young migrants below 20 years are 35 million or 15% of all international migrants. They are not a majority. But as percentage of the total population, they are 35%. So that's why migrants are a small share. In the south, 22 million of young migrants, and in the north, 13 million. So again, like in the case of child labor, there is a decline in trend. In 1990, 21% were young migrants. In 2013, only 15%, although there was no decline between 2010 and 15. Developing regions, 23. Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest, 30% of children are international migrants. Okay. So the global child labor, as we heard in the morning, shows a declining trend, 160 million child laborers and 85 million in hazardous, 11% of the age group. The next one is a table I compiled. I think it is basically what I mentioned, so I will not go into that, but what you can see is 5 to 9, 10 to 14, in all age groups you have migrants, international children of migrants. So let me come to the first category, children migrating with families. So with parents, can be with extended family, can be with others also when they are being smuggled or being trafficked in mixed migration situations. Of course, skilled migrants normally move with families because many countries have special concessions to skilled migrants. They can bring their families. And their children are well integrated in education and labor markets. You hear about the Asian migrant children in the States who are doing very well in exams and others. Australia also, the research shows that. But in Europe generally, children of migrants, whether educated or low educated, are not doing so well because the integration policies lag behind. Then rural-urban migration, again, some move with families, but low-skilled have problems finding good housing and schools for children in urban areas. In China, 36 million migrant children in cities in 2010, and 29 were from rural families. Then asylum seekers and refugees, they also move with families. But they endure numerous hardships and precarious status for children as well. Long periods in detention or in legal limbo until their claims are processed. But let us have this in picture. Global refugees and asylum seekers are very small in number, despite this all the hype about floodgates of asylum seekers and refugees flooding developed countries. In 2013, global refugees were only 15.7 million, 7% of total migrants. And 87 were in developing countries, not in the West. In 2012, about less than half a million asylum seekers in 44 industrialized countries claims. Yeah. We don't know the number of children. So the point is that the bulk of families migrate for employment with their children. So children migrating independently, Nadine talked about this, and I will not go into detail. No reliable data on numbers at the global level. Motives were mentioned. So while there are positive benefits, as international migration, they could fall prey to organized crime and exploitation, including smuggling, trafficking, slavery, during transit and at destination, and major denials of rights. Because the special rapporteur mentioned in his 2009 report, which focuses on migrant children, states should recognize that migrant children, especially those unaccompanied, are most exposed to worse forms of child labor. Again, we don't have much documented evidence on that. So what are the numbers? Again, we don't have reliable. I got it from some source about independent child migrants in a number of countries. The percentage of all children is small, but what we should know is percentage of all children migrants. That information we don't have. But we can see girl migrants are quite high. Then what are the sectors of labor by child migrants? The 2012 global ILO estimate shows that agriculture has 60%, industry 7%, and services 26%, and 7%, and out of which 5% is domestic labor. 7% they could not account. But the options for migrant children may be quite different from this general picture. ILO has found that 2 out of every 3 children engage in domestic work outside home are working below the legal minimum age or in hazardous conditions. Majority are girls. Some are subject to forced labor and trafficking. Then we have them in manufacturing at the end of value chains, which is the subject of another workshop. and unaccompanied children more likely in precarious work and worse forms, as highlighted earlier. There was a helpline, an ILO case study of 437 children in Peru, Kenya, and Nepal. It concluded, in particular with regard to working hours, pay, exposure to work hazards, exposure to violence, including being denied food, etc., and access to education, migrant children in child labor appears to be worse off compared to local children in child labor. This study is available. And then in Thailand, recently IPEC did a study in a number of provinces, and they found again, in one province only they had data on child labor. Again, the situation of migrant children was quite different. Study only was Thai children 88%, but migrant children only 42%. Study and work, Thai children 8%, migrant children 5%. Work only 3%, Thai children, migrant children 36%, they were only working. Neither study nor work, Thai children 1%, migrant children 17%. Okay. How am I on time? Okay. Right, yeah. Okay, let us come to the next category, children left behind. Why are children left behind? Because the parents sometimes cannot afford to take them along when they are internally migrated. Then there are many state restrictions. China, this Hukuo urban registration system is a major deterrent. Where you cannot get many entitlements like access to education, healthcare, unless you have this permit to work in the cities. So this is a problem. And then temporary cross-border migration. Many countries do not allow low-skilled workers to bring families, because if you take the Gulf, no low-skilled worker can bring. Even skilled workers, there is an income threshold above which they can bring. And the UK recently introduced a law, again putting a very high income threshold for people to bring families, migrants, to, for family unification. Right. So, children left behind. Now, numbers in China, internal migrants have 61 million children left behind, 38% of all rural children. And 3% of these are living on their own. Others are looked after by relatives. So you can see the situation. And according to UNICEF, in the Philippines, about 10 to 20%, Indonesia, 1 million, Thailand, 0.5%. And Kerala state of India, which is the highest concentration of migrants, people talk about 1 million Gulf wives, but I did not hear anybody talking about the children. But even if you assume about one child or two children, it will be millions of children left behind. Right. So, what are the pros and cons of left behind children? Of course, people said remittances can reduce child labor because they help families to send children to education, to schools, etc. But of course, work burdens also can increase. In family farm work, in Bangladesh, they found that the probability of a child worker increases for internal migrant by 51%. You cannot generalize from that, but that is a very interesting finding. Then they have to look after siblings, especially girls. And then implications of migrant debt for children's work. Sometimes, they may be forced to work as bonded labor to pay off debts, although again we don't have much evidence. And social cost of migration, actually, a Filipino child once mentioned in a survey, it is better to lose 100 fathers than a single mother. Then children in undocumented irregular situations, I think I'll be very brief here because nothing dealt with that. Migration status is crucial for enjoyment of rights. Yeah. Large gaps in this, and I will refer to one UK study, No Way Out, No Way In, about irregular migrant children, which is summed up in the next slide. 120 undocumented migrant children in the UK recently. And large majority live with their family or close relatives, but most experience poverty and destitution, according to a Guardian report. And 65,000 were born in the UK to undocumented parents. So UK-born children cannot be deported. They are eligible for British citizenship after 10 years. But only 3,700 applied in the last decade, which means they are quite not very confident about getting this. So what are the governance issues in child migration? Origin countries, recruitment agency malpractices, providing misleading information, and sometimes they falsify age. They send young children as adult migrants. A very famous case about Rizana Nafik, executed, the Sri Lankan, my own country, compatriot, who was executed in Saudi Arabia. Although there was a lot of appeal to give her special concession as a child. And labor laws often exclude major sectors of child labor and adult labor, also agriculture, domestic work, informal economy. Most immigration laws have no child rights perspective. And detention of children was mentioned. Yeah. Then next slide is on instruments. I think again I will skip on that, except I refer to ILO Domestic Workers Convention, which Professor Vidit mentioned. It specifically refers to children. And the ILO Social Protection Flow Recommendation 2012, number 202, it mentions about the social protection guarantees 5B, Article 5B, basic income security for children, at least at a nationally defined minimum income level. Providing access to nutrition, education, care, and any other necessary goods and services. It also recommends minimum income guarantees to parents, family, adults, which again is a major factor for child labor. And the ILO Multilateral Framework on Labor Migration, it's a toolkit to develop migration policies for countries. Then policy. Now, former ILO Director General said, a world without child labor is possible with the right priorities and policies. Quality education, opportunities for young people, decent work for parents, a basic social protection flow for all, which is now provided for in this social protection recommendation. And this base document for this conference identifies 4 threads of action: social protection for children and expansion of mandatory full-time and high-quality education, specific legislation and inspection for addressing child labor, and labor and employment policies that provide additional protection for children and decent work opportunities for adult workers. So the basic message is promoting a rights-based approach, governance of migration that respects children's rights irrespective of their migration status, ratifying conventions, which was mentioned earlier. Not only ratifying, also you must enforce their provisions, modify national legislation accordingly, and then provide access to justice, human rights commissions, and other mechanisms for people to complain if rights are violated. And decent work opportunities for parents, provide for migration in conditions of dignity, equity, justice, and security for youth of working age, social dialogue and partnerships, and knowledge gaps. My last slide, partnerships for effective action, social partners, very crucial role, employers, workers. These are the people who are directly involved with governments in migration. So employers' organizations have a corporate social responsibility to address child labor, provide decent work for adults. And then workers' organizations, advocacy of child rights, abolition of migrant child labor, civil society, major role they are already playing in education. And also I haven't mentioned here, agency of youth, children's and youth organizations' voices, they are also very important. Mass media has to be more balanced and provide good portrayal. And international organizations have their own role, and government can work with this. And also, I think I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor, for the excellent presentation and also for trying to meet time constraints. Vamos a pasar a las 2 últimas presentaciones que tienen relación con las mejores prácticas seleccionadas. Es obvio que estamos muy cerca de la hora que se había fijado para el coffee break. Yo sugiero extenderla a las 4:30, la hora del coffee break, para en 20-25 minutos poder hacer las dos presentaciones. Permítame ahora presentar a la profesora Eva María Hamilton López Vélez, egresada de las normales Ricardo Flores Magón y Benito Juárez García en las áreas de Educación y Psicología Educativa en los estados de Oaxaca y Morelos, respectivamente. Cuenta con la especialidad de formador de formadores por el Centro de Cooperación Regional para la Educación de Adultos en América Latina y el Caribe, CREFAL. Ha sido docente en educación básica y media superior en instituciones de la iniciativa privada. En el Consejo Nacional de Fomento Educativo, CONAFE, se desempeñó como jefa de departamento en el área de programas educativos, coordinadora de la región norte del país, delegada en el estado de Chiapas y directora de apoyo a la operación. Coautora de artículos relacionados con la formación de instructores comunitarios en temas de cuidado de agua en el medio rural, atención educativa a niñas y niños con necesidades educativas especiales con o sin discapacidad. Representó a México en el programa de pasantía en la Escuela Rural y la Comunidad, fue panelista del segundo Encuentro Internacional de Educación Comunitaria y el Foro Mundial de Educación y Cuidado Infantil, y ha trabajado en el diseño e implementación del proyecto Asambleas con Madres y Padres en el Medio Rural en BCS. Muchas gracias. Adelante.